Welcome to our first lesson for nutrition and digestion. In lesson 1, we'll be focusing on biological molecules. As this is our second unit in biology, we understand that when we refer to biological, we're referring to living things, as well as molecules becomes a little bit of a connection to our chemistry unit. So our key words are elements, compounds, as well as carbon and hydrogen. Carbon and hydrogen are the two main elements found in all living things. So let's quickly take up this knowledge check. Question 1. Approximately how many elements are there? As we know from our atoms and compounds units, there are approximately 100 different elements on the periodic table. So when we are talking about how many elements, refer to the periodic table. 2. State what all elements are made of. Elements, as we understand, are types of atoms. So, because elements are types of atoms, all of them will be made up of atoms as well. 3. Suggest the symbol for carbons. Carbon is represented by the symbol of a capital C. 4. Suggest the symbol for hydrogen. It is a capital H. Both of this we will actually find on the periodic table. As we recall, we know that when it comes to symbols, the first letter of each symbol on the periodic table will always be capitalized. So symbols on the periodic table, I'm going to put a little asterisk. First letter is always capitalized. Just like in proper nouns. As we know, symbols are like the names of these elements. They represent the element itself, and like a proper noun, because it's a name, we have to keep it capitalized if it's its first letter in the symbol. N is a symbol for which element? It is nitrogen. O for oxygen. 7. Define the term compound. And this is very important that we have this underlined here. A compound is two or more different elements that are chemically combined. And we're going to touch upon this in just a bit. 8. State how many elements are in H2O. Like question 3 and 4, we just have to count the capital letters to know how many different elements are in a molecule. So a capital H and a capital O, therefore, we have 2 elements. So our overview for this lesson is that we're going to recall the names of the common compounds found in living things. Additionally, we're going to state the functions of these compounds and their role in living organisms. Our lesson today is on biological molecules. We're going to focus on how chemistry and elements and atoms and compounds all interact and help living things. Atoms and molecules. Elements are made up of only one type of atom. Each element is represented by a chemical symbol. Atoms can join together, and when atoms join together, the particle is then called a molecule. If the atoms are in a molecule are the same, it is an element. If the atoms in a molecule are different, it is a compound. So, like I said in question 7, all compounds are going to be molecules, but not all molecules are compounds. And what this means is you can have groups of the same element and a bunch of atoms of the same element bonded together to form a molecule. But unless you have 2 or more different atoms or elements chemically combined, then it is a compound. And we explain this in this example here, example 1. We know that H stands for one atom of hydrogen. And hydrogen is what we call diatomic. It is found actually as a pair of two hydrogen atoms bonded together for stability. So H2 is an example of a molecule that is still an element because there's only one type of atom there. So if we compare this to our second example, we have hydrogen still, but we also have chlorine. And when hydrogen and chlorine bond together, we get hydrogen chloride. This is a hydrogen chloride molecule. However, this is an example of a compound rather than an element because there are two different types of atoms in the molecule. In this learning activity, we're going to look at molecules in the table and work out the number of different elements in the molecules and the total number of atoms. And there's two ways to do this. Sometimes you'll be given an image in which it's very easy to count the number of circles or spheres, and then you'll know the number of atoms. But what if you're only given a formula? Well, it's quite easy actually. When we're counting the number of atoms, we simply have to just add up all of the numbers in a formula. So our first example, we have water, which we know as H2O. H2, so we have two hydrogens and one O. There's no number following, and therefore we can assume there's only one. So two hydrogens plus one oxygen, we have a total number of 3 atoms. And in the last column here, for number of elements, we have to just count the number of capitalized letters, the number of different elements. H, O, we have 2 elements total. Second example, ammonia, NH3, 1 N plus 3 H's equals 4. 1 capitalized N, 1 capitalized H, we have 2 elements. Carbon dioxide, CO2, 1 C, 2 O's, 3 atoms total, capital C, capital O, therefore 2 elements. This next example is a little bit trickier because now we have sulfuric acid, something that isn't as common. We have H2SO4. So H2 plus 1S plus 4 O's, we have a total of 7 atoms, as well as 1, 2, 3 different elements. Glucose or sugar, C6H12O6. 6 plus 12 plus 6. We have a total of 24 atoms, and again, 3 different elements. So this brings us to our main topic, biological molecules. Biology is the study of living organisms. Living organisms can be divided into 5 groups, however, we're only going to focus on 2, animals and plants. They're all made up of similar chemical compounds, known as the biological molecules because they're only found in living things. The biological molecules are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and DNA. Each type of biological molecule has a particular job or jobs to do in order to keep a living organism functioning properly. As we've learned in our previous unit, as well as from year 7, all living things must undergo something called the 7 life processes. The 7 life processes are what define living from non-living, and they are movement, respiration, sensation, growth, reproduction, excretion, and nutrition. These 4 biological molecules are tied directly into the 7 life processes, and that's why they're so important to living things. We're going to skip this learning activity for now, and we'll come back to it later. We want to focus on energy. Having studied food molecules, it can be seen that fats and lipids, as well as carbohydrates, or sugars and starches, provide the body with its main source of energy. The energy contained in carbohydrate molecules, like glucose, is released in a chemical reaction called respiration. Respiration is the production of energy. We burn things like carbohydrates and sugars in our body using oxygen in order to make energy for our bodies to use. And we constantly need this stream of energy. We need energy to grow, to move, and basically just to live. We know that our heart needs to constantly beat, we need to constantly breathe, and our brains need energy to be able to think. So we say it actually helps us do everything to survive. It's the main key here. And this brings us to food chains. Animals obtain their carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins from the foods they eat. Therefore, animals are known as consumers. We are consumers. We buy our food from the store, yes, but we are eating other living things in order to get the nutrition we need and able to survive. On the opposite, green plants make or produce these compounds using carbon dioxide, water, and light, and therefore we call them producers. They produce their own food. The process in which they make their own food is called photosynthesis. And it's how plants make their food using sunlight. Food webs show us the interactions of living things in terms of the exchange of biological molecules. So if we quickly look at this example of a food web, we can see at the bottom of the food chain we have things like carrots, grasses, and grains. These are all plants and are considered our producers. Producers are the most important part of a food web. Without producers, there would be no consumers because there would be nothing in which can pass on the nutrition. The carrots go to the rabbits, as well as the grasses, and these rabbits are then eaten by foxes. Without carrots and grasses, the foxes would actually have nothing to eat but birds. And if, again, we remove the grains, so we remove all of the producers, there wouldn't be any form of food in which the foxes can eat. So it's important that we recognize the importance of plants in our own survivability on this planet. So using this food web, we're going to answer a couple of questions on this table below. Calculate the number of producers. So producers, again, do not consume anything else, so they shouldn't have any arrows pointing towards them. We have carrots, grasses, and grains. There are 3. Suggest which organisms might be herbivores. A herbivore is a living organism that consumes only plant tissue. So they only eat plants. We have grasshoppers, mice, rabbits as our herbivores. It's important that we see that birds are not herbivores because they do eat grasshoppers, meaning that they don't eat only plant tissue. Name a top carnivore, so the top of the food chain. We have 2 actually. We have foxes and owls. They are not eaten by anything else. State the number of food sources for the grasshopper. Grasshoppers eat 2 things, grains and grasses. State the organisms that eat grain. We know grasshoppers do. Additionally, mice and birds are also eating the grain. Suggest how many animals are there. There are rabbits, owls, foxes, birds, and mice, but we also have to remember that the grasshopper counts as well. So we have 6. rabbits. Suggest why plants are called producers. They produce their own food, and suggest how animals get their food. They eat or consume other living organisms. All right, so that brings us to the end of this lesson. We're going to finish off with our last knowledge check. How many atoms are found in a water molecule? We can refer back to the table above. There are 3 atoms. We know it's H2O, 2 H's, and 1 O. There are 2 different elements in a water molecule, H and O. A biological molecule is a compound found only in living things. The 4 main biological molecules are carbohydrates, fats and lipids, proteins, and DNA. Animals are known as consumers because they consume or eat other living things. We can find information about the compounds in foods on the nutrition labels of products or foods. Recall the chemical formula for glucose, C6H12O6. State whether biological molecules provide the human body with its main source of energy. We know it's carbohydrates and fats or lipids. And a person who is advised to lose weight might be told to reduce their energy intake. Suggest which food groups they should exclude from their meals. They should really cut down on basically their fats. For the most part, things like fast food or junk food is very high in these fats. So we would suggest they cut down on fatty foods like junk food. As well as sugar. Things like pop, soda are very high in sugars and not much else in nutrients. So I'm just going to add this extra comment here. Fatty foods and sugary foods. So that ends our lesson on biological molecules. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.